You're standing in the supermarket, holding a carton of eggs. You do not think about where the male chickens went. Nobody around you is thinking about it either, but the real answer is far stranger than anything on that label. Somewhere right now, a machine is deciding whether a chicken embryo will live. It is deciding this before the chick has even hatched. It is deciding this based on nothing more than a few cells inside a shell. And the reason this machine exists at all traces back 60 million years, then forward through a jungle in Southeast Asia, then into a laboratory in the 20th century that split one bird into two separate destinies. You think of a chicken as a chicken? Your grocery store does not agree with you. Somewhere along the way, the animal split into two products. One product lays eggs. The other product becomes meat. And the male of the egg-laying kind fits neither category. He is, in the language of the industry, a byproduct, not a mistake, a byproduct, something the system was never built to want. How did an animal end up with a design flaw baked into its own economics? To answer that, you have to go back to a bird that looked nothing like the one on your plate, around 8,000 years ago in the forests of what is now Thailand, Vietnam, and southern China. A wild bird called the red junglefowl lived much like any other pheasant small wary, capable of short bursts of flight to escape predators. This bird is the direct ancestor of every chicken alive today. That claim is not folklore. It comes from genetic work led by Joris Peters, an archaeozoologist at Ludwig Maximilian University in Munich, whose 214 study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences pushed back and re-examined the timeline of chicken domestication using radiocarbon dating on bones from dozens of archaeological sites. Why does a bone matter so much? Because bones do not lie about age the way legends do. Radiocarbon dating measures the decay of a specific carbon isotope inside organic material, and it tells you with real precision how long ago that animal died. Peter's team found that many chicken bones, once assumed to be thousands of years older, were actually far more recent, which reshaped when and where domestication truly began. So picture that forest bird. It was not bred for eggs, it was not bred for meat. Early humans likely kept it for something else entirely. What was that something else? Cockfighting. That is the uncomfortable historical truth. Long before the chicken became dinner, it was spectacle. Roosters were prized for aggression, for their willingness to fight other roosters, for entertainment and ritual and gambling. Egg production was almost an afterthought. The wild junglefowl hen lays only around 10 to 15 eggs a year and only during a single breeding season. That is nothing like the bird you know today. So what changed? Selective breeding changed it. Humans noticed which hens laid a few more eggs than others and bred those hens together, generation after generation. For thousands of years, small advantages stacked on small advantages. A trickle became a flood. By the 20th century, that trickle had become an engineered river. And this is where the story turns sharp. In the 1940s, in the United States, a competition sponsored by the Agriculture Department and grocery chains, nicknamed the Chicken of Tomorrow contest, offered prize money to breeders who could produce a bird with more breast meat, faster growth, and lower feed costs. This was not folk selection anymore. This was industrial design applied to a living animal. The contest worked exactly as intended. Breeders crossed different lines, most famously combining Cornish and white Plymouth rock birds to create what is now called the Cornish cross. This bird grows almost absurdly fast. A modern broiler chicken can reach market weight in around 6 weeks, a process that historically took 3 to 4 times as long. Meanwhile, a separate breeding path was chasing a completely different goal. Egg-laying breeds, most commonly the white leghorn, were selected purely for one trait: maximum egg output with minimal feed at minimal body size. Here's the branching point. Here's where the two destinies formally split. A broiler bird is bred to gain muscle rapidly, but it is a poor egg layer because energy that goes into laying eggs is energy that does not go into growing meat. A layer bird is bred to be small and efficient at laying, sometimes producing over 300 eggs a year, but its body carries very little breast muscle because muscle was never the goal. Genetics is not neutral here. It has a direction. Once you breed a population hard enough toward one trait, you are almost automatically breeding it away from the other. Now hold that in your mind and ask yourself a simple question. What happens to a male chick born into a layer breed in a system built entirely around laying? He cannot lay eggs. That much is obvious. But here's what most people do not realize. He also cannot become a normal meat chicken. His body was never selected for muscle growth. He grows slowly, unevenly, and inefficiently compared to a broiler. Raising him to slaughter, weight would take longer, cost more feed, and produce less meat per dollar than simply raising a broiler breed male instead. So the layer breed male becomes economically invisible, not banned from becoming food, just less efficient at it than every other option on the table. This is the counterintuitive twist most people never hear. It is not that male chickens taste different or are somehow biologically forbidden. It is that an entire century of selective breeding built two hyper-specialized animals, and the male of one of those two lines fell into the gap between them. What happens to those male layer chicks in practice? Within a day of hatching hatcheries, separate male from female. Historically, males were culled almost immediately, most commonly through rapid mechanical processes or gassing, methods regulated for speed to minimize suffering. Though the practice itself has drawn sustained criticism from animal welfare researchers for decades. The scale of this is difficult to hold in your head. Estimates put the number of male layer chicks culled worldwide at somewhere between 6 and 7 billion every single year. That number is not a typo. It is roughly the size of the entire human population, repeated annually in a single industry most people never think about. Does that number sit uneasily with you? It should, and it has sat uneasily with scientists too, which is where the story takes its next turn. Beginning in the early 2000s, researchers began asking a genuinely clever question. What if you could determine a chick's sex before it even hatched? What if the decision could be made inside the egg, before a living, feeling animal existed at all? Maria Elisabeth Krautwald-Junghans, a veterinary scientist at the University of Leipzig in Germany, became one of the pioneers of what is now called in-ovo sexing. Her team developed methods to sample a tiny amount of fluid from inside the egg, early in incubation, and test it for sex-linked hormonal markers, allowing hatcheries to identify male eggs before the chick's nervous system was developed enough to feel pain. This technology is not science fiction. It is commercial reality now. Companies using systems built on this research, including One Process branded Select, began supplying eggs to major German retailers starting around 2018, with France and other European countries following with regulations restricting or banning male chick culling entirely in favor of in-ovo methods. Newer approaches have pushed the timing even earlier. Some techniques now use spectroscopy, a method of shining specific wavelengths of light through the eggshell to detect subtle chemical differences between male and female embryos within the first few days of incubation, long before any nervous system capable of sensation has formed. Notice what actually happened here. The problem of the unwanted male chicken was never really about the chicken. It was about a production system optimized so tightly for one output that it had no functional use for half of what it created. The solution was not to change the animal. The solution was to change the moment the system made its choice. This is where the ancient story and the modern one fold into each other. Your ancestors selected junglefowl for aggression, then for eggs, then split that selection into two extreme specializations. Every choice made sense on its own terms. Nobody sat down 8,000 years ago and designed a system that would one day discard billions of animals a year. It emerged one small selective pressure at a time, the same way a river carves a canyon without ever deciding to. Is that pattern familiar to you? It should be, because it is not unique to chickens. You live inside systems built the same way. Long chains of small, locally reasonable decisions made by different people across different generations that eventually produce outcomes nobody would have chosen on purpose if you laid the whole picture out at once. Fast fashion emerged from small efficiency gains stacked over decades. Processed food emerged from small optimizations for shelf life and cost. Nobody designed the outcome. The outcome accumulated. The egg on your plate this morning carries that entire history, whether you asked for it or not. Every time you crack it open, you are participating in a chain of decisions made by breeders in the 1940s, geneticists in the 2000s, and hatchery operators today, none of whom you have ever met, all of whom shaped the animal before it existed. Does knowing this change what you do tomorrow morning? Maybe not immediately, but it changes something quieter. It changes whether you see a carton of eggs as a simple, neutral object, or as the visible tip of a system with a long, strange, and only partly finished history underneath it. Because that is the real pattern hiding inside this question. You rarely inherit cruelty on purpose. You inherit it through efficiency, through specialization, through 1,000 reasonable choices that never once stopped to ask what they were building toward. The male chicken was not excluded by design. He was excluded by drift, by centuries of selection pressure, pointed somewhere else entirely. And the fix, when it finally came, did not require abandoning eggs, or abandoning chicken, or abandoning any of it. It required someone finally asking the question early enough to matter. You're standing in the supermarket again, holding that same carton of eggs. Nothing about it has changed, but you have. Because now you know the real answer was never about the chicken at all. It was about a choice made over and over, generation after generation, until nobody even remembered it was a choice to begin with.